cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT for short. What do I mean when I say this? The likelihood is that you've heard this term bandied around either on TV, social media, perhaps through friends or even your doctor. CBT is a type of therapy, and there are various types of therapy out there. But CBT has a huge evidence base, and by that I mean it's been researched heavily and it's been shown to work. And because of the scientific background of it, it's recommended in our national guidance for treating anxiety. CBT is mostly delivered on a one-to-one basis, yourself and your therapist, either in person or over video. Other methods are group workshops, again, either face-to-face or online. The difference with HumanColorz is that this course will mimic one-to-one therapy. We're still using evidence-based interventions. We're still meeting through these videos each week and setting homework exercises. Now, don't get caught up in the myths of CBT. Some of you might have logged in today thinking, I'm going to give you a list of coping tools to manage your anxiety, but this just isn't good CBT. Managing anxiety with a tool sounds a bit like putting a plaster over it. The wound is still there, it's just covered up, and this isn't sustainable, nor is it a long-term solution to worry. I'll be asking you to face your anxiety, and by this I mean dare to challenge the thoughts and change the behaviours that you believe are helping you. This will help the anxiety reduce and equip you with a new belief system and new adaptive behaviours that are ingrained within you, meaning that the anxiety won't be triggered easily again in future. And if it is, you'll know what to do. The problem with this approach, well, it's harder, but I'll make an assumption here that you might have already tried some coping tools, perhaps some self-help guides or apps or social media tips, some maybe even referencing CBT, but it hasn't quite worked. That's why I'm an advocate of good evidence-based therapy delivered by qualified therapists. Yes, this is more emotionally demanding. And yes, you might have moments where you face your fears and you feel more anxious in the moment. But can you tolerate a short-term CBT course like this that gets you to do the necessary work for lifelong benefit? My betting is you absolutely can. CBT works on the premise that our thoughts and beliefs influence the way that we feel and behave. Our behaviours and reactions in turn then influence the way that we think and feel. So if thoughts and behaviours influence our feelings, this would suggest that by changing our thoughts and behaviours, we can change our feelings. Make sense? So let's make this a bit more visual. This is a CBT cycle. I want us to consider a simple example of how our thoughts and behaviours influence the way that we feel. Let's say you see a friend in the street and you wave, but they don't wave back. Take a moment to consider the following. What would run through your mind? How would you interpret their response? What other interpretations of their behaviour can you think of? How might you interpret this response if you were feeling anxious that day? And how would that feel? And finally, what would you do? If I could film your reaction and behaviours or reactions later that day, what would I see? Let's have a look at some of the answers I've heard before. Thoughts. What if I've upset them? What if they're angry at me? What if they don't like me? You may notice our what if themes coming through here. The sense of uncertainty is triggered, the catastrophic thinking begins, and when we think in this way, how do we tend to feel? Anxious. And what would you do in response to these thoughts? Keep your head down, go home and worry about what you've done wrong? Worry that they may be talking about you behind your back? Maybe try to find out from other people what might be going on? Maybe you'd get angry and decide you're going to ignore them back. But how might these reactions impact the original thoughts? Take a second to think about that and write down your response. If we go home and worry and then we don't reach out, we'll never find out if our thoughts were actually true, and we're left to dwell. We're acting as if our thoughts are true, when in fact they may not be reality. If we ask for reassurance from others, we're essentially worrying out loud, and if they reassure us, will that even last? Will you feel better about this situation from then on, or will the worry creep back in? And what if you get angry? What might that look like? Reaching out in an angry way to them, or passive-aggressively ignoring them? Might this create a situation that was never there in the first place? If we respond as if our worries and thoughts are true, we often keep the cycle of worry alive. Take a few minutes now to write down your own personal example. Perhaps reflect on the week you've just had and choose a moment where you've noticed yourself worrying or feeling anxious. What was the trigger? What were your thoughts? What did you feel both physically and emotionally? And how did these areas influence each other? Hopefully, by now, you're getting a sense of how CBT can make sense of moments of anxiety. But once we know how CBT understands our anxiety, how do we break out of these cycles? This is our job in the next few weeks, challenging your worries and behaviours to break out of vicious cycles of anxiety. I'd like you to reflect on this idea, and over the next few days, I'd like you to write down your own cycles. Try to complete as many as you can based on moments of feeling anxious. Use your anxiety as a cue to consider, what was the trigger? What did I think? How did I feel? And how did I react? And did my reactions in any way feed back into the thoughts? The purpose of this is to draw your attention to what causes and maintains worry and anxiety. Sometimes we drift through life feeling anxious and never actually pausing to work out what's causing and contributing to our anxiety. It'll also develop your skills in being able to reflect on your anxiety using this framework. If you know what thinking patterns and behaviours contribute to your worry and anxiety, it'll empower you to be able to do something about it. That's it for today. Make sure you know what the homework exercise is, your cycles. But before we finish, take a few seconds to write down your main takeaway message from today's session, and I'll see you next week.